Tournament bowling has now become unviable for the average tournament bowler. It is simply a waste of money. Money that most bowlers will never get any sort of decent return on. This is not a new phenomenon, but it's something that has become a huge problem. And today in this video, I want to specifically talk about tournament bowling in Europe. Now, these problems with tournaments are still relevant in the US and other parts of the world, but I want to examine a recent tournament held in Finland, probably one of the most well-known and prestigious events in Europe, the Ballmaster Open. For those of you that don't know this event, bowlers can have unlimited re-entries as is standard with tournaments that are part of the European Bowling Tour, and in the Ballmaster, the top 38 make it through to the final step 1. Let's start by looking at the scores for this event. The cut was 14.07 over 6 games, an average of 2.34. Now, with a first place prize of €12,000, obviously you're going to have a lot of very good players show up. But let's look at the pattern that was used. At 46 foot and around 2-1, you might think that on paper it could present a bit of a challenge for players, and while there would certainly be some good scores bowled, perhaps the scoring pace would not be ridiculously high. Well, that wasn't the case. Throughout the tournament, there were 21 300 games by my count. Now, I don't care how many great bowlers there are in a tournament. You could have a tournament full of pros. If 21 300 games are bowled, the conditions are too easy. End of story. And here lies the biggest problem in bowling right now, and it's the environment. Let me explain what I mean. Let's take a look at some of the bowlers in action during the tournament. Look at how far outside, particularly the lefties, are bowling. If you didn't know what pattern was being used, you'd probably guess it would be around 42 foot. To me, the fact that you can play this area on the lane on a long pattern defeats the whole purpose of putting a 46 foot pattern down. And this is a problem that I've seen not just in Europe, but across the world. It doesn't seem to matter now what pattern is being put down. Players can just fire it up the outside part of the lane and score for fun. In this event, there were also many players who played the inside part of the lane, but again, it just wasn't a challenge. You seem to be able to score from most angles. Tournaments, to be fair, try and put down these so-called tough conditions, but it's like bowlers are just using a cheat code. Simply fire it up on the outside with a load of revs and the ball will come flying back into the pocket. What I don't understand is why nobody is coming up with a solution to take the outside part of the lane out of play, because now it's simply no longer a challenge for bowlers, and this isn't just an isolated issue. This has been happening on the European Bowling Tour for years, and there's no doubt that it's affected entry numbers on the tour. It's part of the reason why the European Bowling Tour has brought in the PBA 78 hardness urethane rule, because there was a strong feeling that it was simply a purple hammer / urethane fest. This is of course a worldwide problem, but removing the purple hammer still hasn't fully addressed the issue. The conditions that are being put down are playing too easy for the caliber of bowlers that are entering, and the key word there is playing, because perhaps on paper these patterns should be more challenging than they actually are, but they are playing the opposite. The other main problem with the tour is that you have different classifications of tournaments, starting with satellite all the way up to platinum. The problem is, these classifications essentially mean absolutely nothing. The only difference between the tournaments is the amount of prize fund. So a pro could enter any tournament on the tour, and this creates a huge problem for bowlers looking to try their hand at these tournaments. There is no so-called amateur section, no entry point for them. And this is where the European Bowling Tour is missing a bit of a trick. If you're a bowler who is looking to go and bowl tournaments, improve and get experience, why would you pay thousands every tournament to go and bowl essentially against pro level bowlers where the scoring pace is typically through the roof? Yes, it's a great learning curve, but playing these tournaments is not cheap. Typically you're spending between 100 to 150 to enter a squad, and you could easily need 4 or 5 entries, plus flights, accommodation and other expenses, and you're easily looking at 1,000 to 1,500 each tournament. If you make the cut, you're lucky if you make 500 back on average. And to make it worse, you have to bowl at least 1,350 to even have a chance. It seems like every tournament the cut numbers are just getting higher and higher, and now If you don't make 1390, you're not making the cut. And this really does apply to most tournaments on the European Tour, and not just the bigger tournaments such as the Ballmaster. This to me is what makes these tournaments completely unviable for many bowlers. You could bowl incredibly well, average 230 and still not make the cut and walk away with nothing, having spent thousands. And I'm not sure how bowlers can justify spending that much money tournament after tournament. It's all about weighing up the pros and cons of whether a bowler feels it's worth their time and money entering these tournaments. Unfortunately for many, the cons are now starting to easily outweigh the pros. Now, if these were professional events, then you could understand that yes, the scoring pace is going to be high, competition is going to be tough, but the problem is, it's like every tournament is becoming this way. The solution, to me, is that you need different eligibility criteria for different tournaments on tour. Have half of the tournaments open to all, but also have other tournaments that have some strict criteria that gives other bowlers a bit of a chance to compete. You might lose some bowlers due to the eligibility criteria, but you'll gain many more who don't currently play these tournaments for the reasons I have mentioned. You might say that, okay, this is just one tournament where the scoring pace was very high, a tournament that did feature names such as Don Barrett, Parker Bone III, Brandon Bone, Mika Koivuniemi, and a number of extremely talented Swedish and Finnish players. But as I said, this is just standard now for tournaments, particularly in Europe. And just to reiterate, it comes down to me to one thing, and it is the environment. And unless they can find a way to bring the scoring pace down, in my opinion, entry numbers to these tournaments will continue to drop significantly. I'll say it again, 21 300 games in a tournament is simply ridiculous, and a tournament of that kind of caliber should present far more of a challenge for bowlers. And another point, I think that when certain bowlers look at the scores and they see the cut numbers being so high, I really think it can be very off-putting. They see the scores, they see the amount of high games and high sets being thrown, and they start to wonder, well, can I actually compete at that level? Is it worth my time and money going all the way abroad to these tournaments to other countries to know that I have to score 1400 to have a chance of making the cut? For the level of competition and scores that you need to be hitting, it does feel like you might as well just go and play the Pro Tour. At least that way, bowlers would have the pleasure of getting their butt kicked by 100 pros. So that brings us to an end of today's video. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on this in the comment section below. Do you think that the scoring pace for these kind of tournaments has got out of control? And what do you think we can do? And what do you think can be done to A, bring the scoring pace down, and B, just create a tournament environment that is fairer for more bowlers? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, thank you, bowling fans, and see you all next time.